Matthew, everyday audiophile, music lover, and beer enthusiast. Now, today we have a lot to talk about, so the beer is nothing special. It is the trusty Shiner Bock. Yes, not a craft brewery, but by technical definition, they don't produce enough to be one of the big players, so yes, they are a microbrewery still. But let's get on it. Today, we're talking about the Lone Star Audio Fest. This was held the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just this past weekend. And I want to start with the conclusion. Lone Star Audio Fest is for people that love music. It's not about the gear. It's never been about the gear. It is about finding the right way to listen to your music and just enjoying a good time with other people. If that sounds like your kind of show, then Lone Star Audio Fest is really where you should be exhibiting, and where you should just be attending. With that conclusion out of the way, let's talk about how I arrived there, because that's a pretty bold statement when you're comparing it against the likes of Capital Audio Fest or Axpona, or even the most recent Southwest Audio Fest that just occurred in Dallas, not 2.5 hours north of Austin. When I compare Southwest Audio Fest and Lone Star Audio Fest, there's really one thing that differentiates the two. Yes, they're both audio shows. Yes, they both target the music lovers, the people that are going to buy the equipment. But when I look at Southwest, what I really see at the end of the day is a bunch of equipment manufacturers that want you to buy their gear. I'm just going to call it how it is. Of course, they do love music, and they also sit back and enjoy a brewski or whiskey, whatever it is. But at the end of the day for Southwest, all of them are looking for a check written by you. And that's just the feeling that I got at the end of Southwest. There were a bunch of rooms that I enjoyed, but I didn't really get to sit down in one room in particular and just ask for my music to be played. It was always music that I wasn't familiar with, music that the vendors knew sounded good on that system, on that day, in that room. Lone Star flips that on its head. In its origins, it catered to mostly DIYers, so this was just a group of people that loved music and tried to find newer and better ways of building equipment to experience that music. And it shows, right? You could go into a room, any room that is in Lone Star, and ask for whatever track you want, whether it be jazz or rap or classical rock, alternative, indie. Doesn't matter. They want you to experience your music, and by hearing for yourself how good your music sounds on that system, hopefully that's what convinces you to buy that equipment. Sure, everyone in the rooms at Lone Star also wants you to buy their equipment, but they're going about it in a different way, in a way that caters to the music lovers more, in my opinion. With that, let's talk about the setup of Lone Star and what types of rooms there were, equipment, and just my general notes, the highs, the mids, and the no's. So Lone Star occupied 2 floors, the main floor off to the side, and then the second floor. On the main floor, there were 7 rooms plus a marketplace, and then on the second floor, there were probably 12.5 rooms. Not nearly as big as Southwest, but every room was filled with people that genuinely love music, and that's the difference. I want to keep on reiterating that. But let's start with the first floor, those 7 rooms and the marketplace. There were a lot of interesting systems in this room, speakers that I'd never heard of besides SVS, which, speaking of SVS, Lone Star did pair with THE, the home theater experience, so some of the rooms were more home theater movie based while others were music based. For me, it was really interesting getting to hear the home theater side of things. There were definitely some rooms there that caught my attention. Maybe not ones that I would have in my music room, seeing that the devices were more geared towards movies, but still interesting nonetheless. Things that I would never have heard otherwise, that they would for sure never be at Southwest Audio Fest. So the first room was SVS. They'd set up a 7.2 surround sound system that was using all of their top end gear, their new 17-inch subs, and the bass coming out of those subs was so intense you could hear it 2 rooms over, which I feel terribly bad for the people in the marketplace, but it was impressive in its own right. The next room over was the marketplace, and there were about a dozen vendors or so. I happened to pick up a new isolation base for my turntable that I am loving so far. There was Pilot Radio, Bob's Devices, Miller Audio, run by Brane, who I've known for a year and a half now. He's a great guy. Audio Foundation, ATC was there with their new powered speakers. It was generally a fun room to be in. A lot of great people to talk to, a lot of great information. I spent a lot of time in that room, that's for sure. The next room over was probably the most well-known system in the entire show. So there were actually 3 systems set up. The main one, though, was Focal Grand Utopias, I believe, with Rel number 32s, the Naim reference stack, those towers, the power amps, and then the center is the preamp. And it was easily the best system there. It should be, because it is by far the most expensive system, but the sense of ease and silky smoothness of the music that came out of those speakers was really second to none. It, to me, easily bested nearly every system that I heard at Southwest, and that's saying something. They were set up correctly. The bass was tuned in nicely. I don't even think they really needed the subs. They just did it because why not? But yes, it was one of the best systems. Off to the side, they also had a pair of Dyne Audio speakers. I'm not sure the model. Opposite of the SVS room was the Audio Mirror room, one of the few horn speakers in the show, and they were pretty interesting in that you had a ribbon tweeter and a horn mid-range and mid-woofer, along with powered subs on the side of the speaker. I'd never seen something like that, and while they definitely sounded nice for jazz, I mean, that saxophone was one of the most realistic saxophones I'd ever heard in my life. Besides that, they were a little bit too forward for me, a little bit too shouty in that upper mid-range. I did talk with the rep that was there, and he said that there were issues with the room that caused one speaker to not only sound a little bit louder than the other, but they had to go in and make last-minute changes to the crossover for the tweeter so that they could correct some of the issues. And while it wasn't my favorite speaker, I think it's so cool to see a manufacturer come in and make manual adjustments to the crossover just so they can fix issues with the room. Yes, that's something that you can do with DSP, but they went a more traditional route that I think is really hardcore and really awesome. The room next to that was Sound Sanctuary, and this room was focused on movies. They had this really awesome sound bar that went under your TV, and for what it was phenomenal. I actually wouldn't mind having something like that in my living room instead of a pair of speakers. That's how good it sounded. But as that room was dedicated to movies and not necessarily music, we're going to move on to the next room, which was Innovo Audio Designs. This was also a room that was more dedicated to the movie space, but the speakers could be used for audio. These were like flat panel speakers that had a mid-range, a tweeter, and then 3 pairs of powered subwoofers on the side. They were really skinny, from the side profile. And for what they were, I thought they were pretty good. A little on the pricey side, but really pretty good and absolutely gorgeous. I could see these living in my living room, and my wife would be thrilled. Absolutely, that's all she would ever ask for. The next room over was PBN Audio. Now, these speakers were gargantuan, and I bet they weighed a shit ton. And while they were a little bit weird, a little bit too boxy for me, they did sound pretty good. Their low-level detail was unlike anything that I had heard at the show, whether Lone Star or Southwest Audio Fest. They just had this ability to recreate all of the tiniest micro details in the music, the little footsteps, sliding your hand across the guitar. It was really phenomenal in that sense. The only thing they gave up because of this intense micro detailism was that they were just a little bit forward sounding for me. The soundstage depth didn't go very much past the speakers. It was kind of thrown in front of the speaker. So I imagine these are really meant for a bigger room, but just that sense of ease and all of those details it was really, really nice to see. So, wonderful room there. They also gave me a great shirt that I'm for sure going to wear. I'm a dog person. I have to wear them. But that was it for the first floor. Let's talk about the second floor, where really most of the magic is, where most of the Lone Star Audio Fest-ness lives. So, from the get-go, there are a number of manufacturers or vendors on the second floor that have been here year after year in Lone Star Audio Fest. And I want to call them out because it was super awesome of them to still make it to the show, even though it had moved from Dallas the previous year. So what comes to mind is Raven Audio. So nice to see them again. Norman Tracy of PureArtFi and Audio Crafters Guild. His speakers are always a blast to listen to. Uilleam Audio. This is Mike. He's like a one-man shop, and he builds GR Research, so Danny's speakers, and he's really good at it. His cabinets are beautiful. Additionally, there was Pi Speakers, run by Wayne. And as always, it's wonderful to see him. He's so energetic and so nice. His speakers also sound great. While not always my cup of tea, I really did like how they sounded this time. He was running them with a tube amp, and the pairing was just right. What can I say? Horn-loaded speakers, tube amps. It's always a plus in my book. At the end of the hall was JW and Speakers with Josh. I've always enjoyed his speakers when I've listened to them in previous shows, but they were never ones that I could see myself owning. And what I just mean by that was, usually when I was going in there was always a ton of people in his rooms. It was just, I couldn't get the music that I wanted to listen to, and the music that was playing, it wasn't for me. And this was the first time that I went back to his room, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I just sat on the couch and listened to music. I didn't know this, but Josh is a recording engineer, and so he was playing some of his recorded music, and it was like listening to a live performance. It was the most lifelike of any of the rooms there. I think that's a testament to him being a recording engineer and just knowing what he wants his music to sound like. So he's able to go from beginning to end on input, singers, instruments, mastering, and then output on his speakers. And it shows. It was wonderful to listen to, and he was just wonderful to talk to. Finally, there was Van Ziel Audio. He's also been at the shows for a number of years. While I didn't get to make it into his room, I have been on previous years, and his horn-loaded speakers always sound way better than you think they're going to sound. So, again, a number of vendors that came to this show, again, even though it got moved, and it was super awesome to see new people show up. So, Brane Audio, they're based in Austin. It's just like 5 or 6 engineers out of college that wanted to build a new portable speaker. and it sounded pretty good. They were doing something that I'd never seen before. So they actually use a vacuum to suck out all of the air on the inside of this enclosure, this little Bluetooth speaker enclosure. And then they're able to change the magnet structure on their subwoofer to gain more bass output. So they were comparing it to JBL and Bose Bluetooth speakers, and the result was just awesome. It did lose a little bit of clarity to the JBL speaker, but you're not listening to it in your media room. You're listening to it out and about at a park or at, a backyard party. So I think losing that little bit of clarity to gain an extra 15 hertz of bass extension was well worth the trade-off. So Brane, that was super awesome to see. And I'll probably be picking one up in the near future. I was that impressed. There was also Origin Hi-Fi, which was really the Lingdorf room. So they were showing off their room perfect, room correction, and Lingdorf speakers. It really made me question DSP. Not like DSP is bad, but whether I should rethink about using it in my system. Because for a long time I haven't, and it's just because DSP traditionally for me has kind of sucked a little bit of the life out of the music. That's just the way I interpret it, but it sounds like I may need to reevaluate my preconceptions about DSP. The next one that I really want to talk about is Toby speakers. So they've been around for a while. Toby, the original guy that ran it, he unfortunately passed in 2015, 2016. And was taken over by one of the apprentices, the guys that had been working with him for over a decade. And he flipped the business on its head. He wanted to start building speakers that he was interested in and turn to homemade ESLs, so electrostatic loudspeakers. And this was the most surprising of the room. You could tell that he cared deeply about what he was doing because he went on a nice 10-minute rant that was very informational about what he was doing and their goals for designing the speaker and what separates his ESL from some of the major brands and what they're able to do with it. And listening to the music, it showed. He also brought a little desktop system. So if you go into the next room, there was a homemade desk with a pair of ESL speakers that was the personal desktop system. And oh my God, that was one of the most enlightening desktop speaker systems, maybe speaker systems ever that I've heard. So transparent. So immediate with transients. Of course, being an ESL that didn't go that deep, about 120 or 100 hertz. So you have to fill in the bottom with a sub, which is fine, but it was kind of eye-opening how good this sounded. So I can't wait to talk with them more, and since they're based here in Fort Worth, hopefully I can stop by and listen to them a little bit longer. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of tracks that I need to play to really get my thoughts together on how they sound. Finally, there's 2 rooms left to really talk about. There was Audio Geeks. This is a dealer. They were showing off a system that was $2,000, which was by far the cheapest system at the show. It was fine speakers with Cambridge gear, and for $2,000, it sounded great. It sounded really, really good. Now, the turntable isn't included in that. It was just a CD player, an amp, a streamer, and the speakers. But if I was able to get a system like that for $2,000 15 years ago, I would be in a much different place today. So it was really cool seeing a dealer or just a vendor in general show up with a speaker system that meets a price point that is really the starting point for 90% of people out there. I don't think most people are going straight to $10,000, going straight to $50,000 or $100,000 systems. You start with $1,000 or $2,000 and you build it from there. So it was really awesome to see them do that. and I hope to see them again, and I want to see the version 2 of this system next year, truly. The last room, affectionately called the Orchard Audio Room, was the Joey G's audio channel. So this is also another YouTube channel. I've only just watched a couple of his videos, but he was repping Orchard Audio and Lab 12 and Chesky Audio, and the room just sounded pretty good. We had drinks. Oh yeah, forgot about that. You go to Lone Star Audio Fest, you get some drinks, like Shiner. But we hung out with Joey, and it was just a good time listening to music. He is very passionate about what he does. A little bit crazy, but he loves music just like everyone else in that show. So that about covers all of the rooms. Really, as I was going through from room to room to room, it's so apparent that everyone there is more interested in the music itself instead of the selling of a product. And that's really the point that I want to drive home. Whether you're talking with a little bit bigger brand like the guys at Raven Audio, or the one-man shops, Norman Tracy, or Mike of Uilleam Audio, or Josh of JWN, you know that you're talking to someone that cares about music first and equipment last. And I think that is the selling point of the show. It's the reason that I'm going to continue going back year after year, unless they move it to, some place that's 8 hours away. I don't really want to drive that far. But that's what I hope convinces you and anyone else to go to the show next year. Yes, it's not as big as your big brand name shows like Southwest or Capitol or Expona, but the experience, in my opinion, is even better than those shows because you get to interact with everyone and laugh and listen to music and just talk about their experiences and share yours and maybe learn something new. But until then, I will see y'all next time. See ya.